So we might kick off. So the goal of this webinar today is to talk about differentiation, right? Differentiating for the sake of differentiating doesn't really give an outcome. The real goal of differentiating in my mind is to create a competitive advantage. And to do that, I'm going to share my experience of how I learned to differentiate, and also give some examples later on of what the outcome was to a few clients that I work with when they found their right differentiation strategy and how they applied it into the sales process. Also, we've got Matt and Michael on the call. They sent through an email overnight about some of their challenges in their business, and we'll unpack that to a certain degree as well. So if you have any questions, we've got the chat box here. I can see that, and I'll answer that as we go, and we'll go from there. Okay. Right. So the agenda today is I'm going to talk about the importance of differentiation, the challenges that come with entering a competitive market, and then why we want to look at differentiation. Then we want to understand our own constraints, and this is a really important one as well. Then why it's important to know your competition, but we also don't want to obsess over them also. And it really comes down to dare to be different, swim against the tide. Hey, Matt from New York. And then there's a repeatable framework that I've learned on how I apply a differentiation strategy, which has to start, in my opinion, from the very first moment that you engage with a client. A lot of startups, they'll create a differentiated product, but it doesn't, logically speaking, you can't do the same as everybody else and go, hey, when you sign on to be a client, then I'll start differentiating. Doesn't quite match up. You have to be different from the beginning and follow that all the way through. Then we'll talk about differentiation over time, and then how I can help at the end and answer any questions. Right, so who am I? So I'm the founder of Sales Market Fit. I'm on a mission to help B2B startups really see the truth behind what is actually required to win clients consistently. The reason I started this business is since 2015, I've been selling B2B SaaS. Yep, sure thing, Bill. Let me just figure that out. Is that better? Yep, no worries. So I started working with an Australian B2B startup, and I followed all the go-to-market strategies, all the content online, and something was missing. It just wasn't working. So it really led me down the path of understanding or the psychology around by how people buy and what's the truths that people are missing. So we were selling a ticket price somewhere around the $20,000 a month to $45,000 a month on ideally 5-year terms. So they were significant contracts. By the time you took in implementation, it was around $600,000 to $700,000. So around $2 to $3 million contracts for mobile apps and a desktop browser, right? So it was very difficult sale, really, at the end of the day. And we were competing against Fortune 500 companies like Autodesk, SAP, and ProjectWise in the engineering drawing space. It was a very, very difficult competitive environment that we were in. But we needed to differentiate ourselves enough to create a competitive advantage. We couldn't go head to head with the competition. They were too strong, had too much reputation. So we were forced to really think about how to differentiate ourselves. Now, we were able to take market share from these companies repeatedly, and this is what I'm going to speak about today. So I'm going to talk about a bit of what I've learned, and then how I applied it to the business that I worked in, and then also how others have taken that and applied it to their business as well. So I've spoke about this in a previous webinar, but I'll speak about this all the time. It's a truth pyramid. So we can't ignore fundamental truths that exist out in the world. It's particularly in the sales world, or when we're trying to take a new product to market. Unfortunately, most people try to implement a process without actually addressing these fundamental truths. So if we do that, the process is going to fall over. It doesn't succeed because ultimately it's built on the wrong foundations. And this leads to poor results all the time. So you may have seen it where people try to implement a different process, but without actually changing their behaviors or their beliefs, and it always falls over. So, but if we align our process to the fundamental sales truths and account for them, or account for truths that exist when differentiating or creating competitive advantage, everything begins to fall into place. Now, this is about the importance of differentiation in my world, or how I think about it. Um, Differentiation not only includes the product, but it also includes how you engage with the market. As I mentioned previously, if you creating a differentiated product and it's part of your culture and a part of the way your business is different, it just doesn't make sense to follow this like the same approach to market. Um, and you because you get the results of what everyone else is doing, and you'll end up competing with everybody else. Now, our clients are so busy and they have set routines. What we want to do is be able to grab their attention over the competition. And this is one of the reasons why we want to differentiate. We need to have a point of difference, and to create a different kind of value. And that's really the whole point here. We need to be able to create a competitive advantage and make it easier for our clients to say yes, they will buy it. We don't want to give them, we don't want them to have to draw too many get to a decision to buy us on their own, because their world is so fraught with distraction. We want to make it as easy as possible. And differentiation is a large part of that. Now, we can't expect the market to be able to tell the difference between us and the competition. We have to own that message. And if we don't own the message, we leave too much to chance. And this is why deals stall, sales stall, clients don't come on board, just because they can't effectively tell the difference. They can't differentiate between us and the competition. And if they can't differentiate between us and existing competitor, it makes sense to go with the existing competitor because they've been around for longer. Now, if we can differentiate better, it makes less work and gives a better return on effort over the long run as well. Now, these are the challenges and opportunities that exist in a competitive market. Now, I think about things in different analogies, like a parallel lesson that we could learn. Now, established competitors have a gravity, they have a certain gravity about them. Now, that comes in the form of case studies, reputation, brand, runs on the board, referrals. So if we try to compete on that like a head to head with them, that gravity will naturally pull the clients or the market to those larger businesses, because at the end of the day, they more than likely have more tools at their disposal. They've just been around longer. They may have different case studies. Michael, you're on the call now. We spoke earlier. They've just been around in the market longer, and you're trying to figure things out. So it doesn't make sense to go head to head with them. Now, our competitors do not want us to win. We have to be aware that we live in a competitive world. In a competitive world, it's not uncommon for startups to be all congratulatory, or founders of startups, when they get in hubs, to be all congratulatory about them starting a business. Sometimes that can they don't take into account that there's competition out there and it's a cutthroat world. We have to fight for our way to exist in the market. It can be hard to create an advantage against these larger competitors, and startups rarely win competing head to head. It just doesn't make sense. Even the likes of Uber and Airbnb, I actually read a book last week called The Cold Start Problem. They didn't go head to head with the market. First and foremost, they started in a little niche in San Francisco with Uber, and Airbnb started little niches to create a competitive advantage, and get a foothold before they moved on. Now, in saying that, everyone has a weakness. We cannot, as a company grows, they always have weaknesses. There is always two sides to a coin. There's always an advantage and a disadvantage, no matter what stage your business is in. Now, as a company grows, they move slower. So if you've got existing competitors in a market and they're far more established, there is a negativity, there is a negative to that. And so we want to try to actually uncover that. And there's always a niche to find. It may be a very small niche, but it could be enough to give you a foothold to get a couple of clients, demonstrate your value, create a few case studies, and then your competitive advantage may increase slightly that you can go to another market, an adjacent market or a geography, and then build on that, then go from that geography or that competitive advantage to another, and we leapfrog up the market until we can get into the early majority of the technology adoption curve. Now, this is one of the most important parts about understanding where you are as a business. It's about being honest about your constraints. Sometimes founders ignore their weaknesses in their business. Sometimes they look at that, they don't quite see the ugly baby that they have. Now, this makes sense because when you're going to pitch to investors and you want them to invest in your business, you brush over the weaknesses because you want them to invest in your strengths. But it's a complete opposite when it goes to going to the market. You don't want to brush over your weaknesses, but you want to actually know what they are so you can turn those weaknesses into strengths. Now, again, two sides. There is always two sides to a coin. Now, because the market will see these weaknesses, and there could be reasons for not to buy you. So we want to address them, and we want to make sure we own that message and take control, be proactive in actually finding out the right markets that will resonate with our weaknesses. Now, in the initial stages, this may lower your total addressable market initially, but it will give you a competitive advantage. Now, this is a case study when I worked at a company called Red Eye. These are all the weaknesses, perceived weaknesses. When I started, we did a typical SWOT analysis, but the founder never saw these as weaknesses. But we had to, what we did here was, okay, let's label them and see what they are. So we're a small Australian startup competing against the large Fortune 500 companies of the US. Because we're a new platform, we had a lack of features. When I think I started at the business, there was maybe 15 people. It was still developing. We had a minimal reputation. I think maybe had one or two clients when I started. We definitely didn't have any case studies. We were a small team and we were an immature, incomplete platform. So I was like, okay, so let's address these one by one. How can we turn that small Australian startup into a strength? And so initially we focused on the region, and being based in Queensland, I drew a ring around the actual state or the city of Brisbane, which is the capital city. And then I went all of Queensland. And then I went down into New South Wales, which is the next state to the south of Queensland, then into Victoria, and then South Australia, and then Australia as a whole, because I knew that our competitors of Autodesk and SAP and ProjectWise were American-based companies that didn't have boots on the ground. So I focused on the region to create a competitive advantage. I also knew we had a lack of features. We were never going to be able to compete against those established competitors. So we focused on outcomes. We focused on outcomes and how we would affect their business process. A key part of this was learning exactly what business processes we affected and improved inside their organization. And we focused on delivering the outcomes in that sense, because we knew the competitors weren't achieving the right outcomes. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to enter the market. And because we had a lack of features, we were easy to train. We were easy to train on a platform. It was based on consumer UI. Now, these are all competitive advantages but we had to own the message to go to the market with. They weren't naturally seeing this. So because we didn't have a reputation, we were a growing business or getting established, we turned that into, we will overservice our clients and form strong relationships. I was always traveling around Australia, probably 2 weeks out of every 4. We were going to see people on site and spend time with people in their business, because we knew our competitors, who were American-based and who were far larger, had far larger clients than the ones we were chasing, we knew that they wouldn't do that. They just not economical for them to do it. So they weren't able to properly defend that market because we were so more nimble and we could react faster. Now, because we're a small team, we focus on customer service and we were responsive and could make fast decisions. The thing with a large company is they were so big and many moving parts, they were slow to make decisions. And because we're an immature platform, we were iterating really quickly. So we were releasing new functionality fortnightly, and this seemed like we were developing way faster than the likes of Autodesk and SAP because they were far larger, they had far more functionality, and I think they may have been releasing every quarter or maybe every 6 months, but we were doing it every couple of weeks, and we gave our customers the ability to influence the functionality roadmap. So they felt like they had a input into the platform, which went further to building strong relationships. So with this, we were able to go to the Australian market and get a foothold. Okay. Again, thinking about the total contract value of between $2.5 to $3.5 million, this was a significant an advantage for us to do this. And this, even though the price point was high, this still applies for smaller businesses as well. We have to find our competitive advantage. Now, this is the next part here, and knowing the competition. Now, if anyone who's just joined, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I'll be happy to answer them as we go, and we'll go from there. Now, it's really important to know your competition, but we also don't want to obsess over them as well. Think about, we're playing a game of chess, right? We must know where they have advantages, because where we have advantages, we don't want to try to create a competitive advantage where they're going to beat us, right? But we want to be able to turn their advantages into disadvantages when we can. Like I said before, every coin has two sides, or it doesn't matter how thinly you slice a piece of bread, there's always two sides as well. So there's always a negative to a positive, and that's our role, or your role in your business, to turn those advantages, seemingly advantages of your clients, your competitors, into disadvantages to find a niche for yourself. Now, stay away from areas where they had clear strengths. And I'm gonna show you the inverse of what I did with Red Eye with Autodesk in a second, just to show you how we did that. Now, know the markets and niches that aren't being serviced enough by your competitors effectively to give you a foothold. Now, they may not be markets that you can exploit and grow and to have a sustainable business for the next 5 or 10 years, but it will give you a foothold and allow you to, as a springboard, to potentially move into other markets. And you only need to go look at the history of Uber and Airbnb they have followed this exact strategy. You know, Airbnb, to my knowledge, started in San Francisco, and then they grew from there into other cities. And the cold start problem is about building a network effect, but it's exactly about creating a competitive advantage or differentiating enough, getting traction, and moving into other markets. So I recommend reading that book if you haven't read it. Now, also know who are the champions and advocates of your competitors in the business if you want to enter. And I'll talk about that in more detail in a second. But also, you don't want to obsess over your competitors as well. You know, they're approaching a problem from a different perspective. And if you obsess over them, it actually might stop you from innovating and providing unique value, because you might try to match them as well. And then you're going to start losing your uniqueness about your business. Now, let them obsess over you. Let it be a David and Goliath battle. Let them see you coming and try to match you. Always looking forward. In my mind, if you're looking over your shoulder at a competitor or looking elsewhere, there's a chance that you're going to run into a wall. So don't do that. Just keep looking forward. And we did that. We never really obsessed over SAP or Autodesk or ProjectWise, because we were far more nimble. We probably weren't on their radar, and it helped us stay the line in actually winning market share. and believe in your unique value. Believe you have a unique value set and that your competitors will find difficult. And a lot of that comes down to know the outcomes you provide and focus on the outcomes, not the features. It's a great way to nullify the features that you have in your platform. Now, this is the case study, the opposite to when we were looking at Autodesk. Autodesk was in 95% of the businesses that we would enter, right? They were a stable global company, but their weaknesses is they use a partner network. So customers had little influence on the roadmap of Autodesk. They didn't have relationships with every customer. It was their partner network that did. Because they were a large global US company, the big businesses here in Australia had limited access to key decision makers. So they couldn't influence the roadmap or the direction of functionality in the platform. They also followed a traditional pricing model. Now, they were a specialist engineering powerhouse. So, which meant they weren't across other functions within their clients' businesses because they were predominantly using Autodesk to design projects or engineering content, engineering drawings. They didn't need to be across other parts of their business. So they weren't serving operations really well out in the field. Now, this is a really important part here because they are a really strong engineering powerhouse. We knew the engineerings or the drafting house or the people responsible for the engineerings or creating the engineering drawings would have been advocates of Autodesk. So out of that, what we did is went, okay, well, let's not go to them because they will block us. Let's go to operations. So we found our niche just from that here. Our niche was don't go to engineering, go to operations or asset management that would use the drawings in another part of the life cycle of the drawing. We also identified the traditional pricing model. So we changed the pricing model to be different as well to create a niche. Now, they had so much functionality, but the inverse of that is it's too complicated for non-engineers to use it. And it required a high training requirement. So what happened was people who weren't part of, who didn't know how to use the system would use they would just export and use paper or just use it out of the system, use Dropbox or something like that. If you go back to remember the functionality of Redeye, we had limited features. But it was easy to use. So that was a complete niche or complete difference, a competitive advantage that we leveraged a lot when we were meeting with customers. And so they were inside 95% of the businesses that we engage with, but they weren't across all the departments, which I've kind of just touched on here. So there were gaps in their functionality. So we exploited those gaps, went into those areas, and we would kind of defend or build out a strategy that would encompass asset management, operations, all those kind of departments, and then we would engage with engineering afterwards. It was a different value set. So that's how we turned the weaknesses, their strengths into weaknesses, and it gave us a clear market of where to go or who to target inside those client organizations. Now, dare to be different as well. Now, this is what I talk about differentiation is it has to start in how you engage with the market. Now, our whole sales strategy in the business revolved around differentiation and leveraging our unique value. Now, we didn't always get it right, but we weren't afraid to try different things. And I would recommend don't be afraid to try different things as well. Now, to compete, we needed to be different to our competitors. We needed to think differently and act differently. And just doing the same would have put us at a disadvantage. If we're competing head to head with a multi-billion-dollar business and we're trying to do the same things, it just wouldn't have worked. So I think about the movie 300 with the Spartans, 300 Spartans against the Persian army, I think it was. We were trying to create that bottleneck that the 300 Persians could compete like in a niche environment. That's what we're trying to do here. Now, we found markets and clients that resonated with our unique value, and that was predominantly in Australia. Of all the places in Australia that resonated with us the most, it was actually a city called Adelaide, which is a 2-hour flight from Brisbane. We spent an extraordinary amount of time down there, and we started building out a beachhead of clients. We had a couple of clients there, and that helped us springboard into other clients around the country. And then that got us from Australia into New Zealand, which is an adjacent English-speaking country as well, which we did that in a very deliberate process to move on and create that competitive advantage. Now, we completely dissected our clients' buying journey and developed strategies for each stage as well. Now, one of the things here is, because we were different, this is exactly the process that the Japanese, or very similar, the Japanese and the German car markets took when competing against the US mass-produced market. They actually dissected the whole journey of building a car and did it differently to the mass-produced market as well. This is not a new strategy. It's very similar to the total quality management strategy that has been employed in the car industry many years ago. And it's a great way for startups to get a leg up against existing competitors. And we used it really well against larger American competitors. And it'll work for you as well. Now, we were prepared to learn critical lessons before scaling. If we had tried to scale too quickly, it wouldn't have worked. And this has resonated across Uber, Airbnb, again, in that book that I spoke about called The Cold Start Problem. They didn't scale. They started in the smaller cities and grew before they scaled. If they had tried to roll out around the world in one go, they wouldn't have got the network effect or the elements that they needed to build their business. I think Airbnb says when they get to a critical mass of 300 rentals in a city, then that's a critical mass, and then they can start moving on and doing other strategies. So this is what we did, is use that differentiation to learn critical lessons and before we began scaling into other areas. Now, we were tenacious and we weren't afraid to try different things. So this award on the right-hand side, we were a really young company approaching the water industry here in Australia. They were not going to give us a innovation award for being a young startup with not many customers in the water industry. So what we did at a national water conference is, this was a centerpiece of a table for a dinner at one of the conferences. So me and the founder thought this would be a great way. This looks like a great innovation award. We actually took the centerpiece. I went down to a shop, got that plaque engraved on it, and then said the most innovative award for Ozwater it was back in 2016 or 17, whatever it was. And then we presented that with the team, and we put that all on our pitch decks. And now everyone, I think even to this day, they still have that down as award one. It was about being tenacious and trying different things and trying to kickstart us getting a head start in that market. And it worked to some capacity. It definitely made the team feel better about themselves, probably even helped with investment. But we were tenacious and we weren't afraid to try different things. Now, this is the repeatable differentiation framework that I use every single time, and I teach my clients who are having trouble with this. I call it the 4-8 method, right? First and foremost, educating the market in a different way to help you stand out from competitors is a really good way to get your market potential clients to sit up and go, oh, I never thought about it like that, and cement your business and yourselves as subject matter experts. So I call it, this first one is educate. And it's by identifying and visually articulating the root causes of the issue in the industry that you solve. B2B SaaS businesses, at the end of the day, are fundamentally business process improvement tools. They improve a business process. And they improve a business process specifically by removing 7 or 8 different inefficiencies in a business. 1 is manual processes, 2 is silos of truth, 3 is manual effort, and there's about 4 or 5 others as well. But it's about identifying the root causes of an industry or the industry problems that you solve. And it's educating the market and showing them, hey, in your business or in the market, this is why you're having the problems that you're having. And it's about getting them to see the root causes, because if you can address the root causes, it does not matter what industry you enter, the root causes are the same. So you can start building a process based off those root causes. And then if you can do that, most people will only talk about the symptoms, not the cause. And this is the purpose of this first part. The next part is, if you can identify and articulate what those root causes are, think about weight loss. Before someone loses weight, they have a big guy and then a skinny guy. So think about the first part is educating someone. This is the inefficient current processes, or the big guy model inside your business. And then the next part is you want to articulate how your product or your platform facilitates an outcome, how it will remove manual effort, it will create a single source of truth, how it reduces time to do to collate data, how it's automation. Articulate how the platform solves those problems in the industry. So you think about the fat guy and then the skinny guy. And if you can do that, you're showing someone, which addresses a fundamental first principle of any sale, is a sale is a journey from the beginning of this is how it exists in your business today. This is how we would help with an outcome. And then what you do next is you demonstrate, hey, that's what it is. When we had a call, you said, this is the issues in your business. This is how we'd help it, in a demo, an outcomes-based demo. And then at the end, we quantitate. We show them the impacts of their current processes to address the indecision, which is our biggest competitor, hands down. And we want to show them, hey, this is what this process, or this is how it's affecting you. It could even be a weight loss. This is why you're in the situation that you're in. And then we want to show them how we would actually prove, the outcome that they will get from implementing your solution. Now, most people do not, or businesses do not articulate the problem in their industry anywhere near like this. All they'll do is demonstrate the solution, but that's on a massive assumption that the market understands their problem. They definitely don't understand the root cause of the problem. They just understand the symptoms, right? So we want to address the root cause. And if you can do this, you'll put yourself a million miles ahead of your competition. Once I was able to do this when I was a company at Red Eye, I was able to reduce the sales pipeline by about 75%. And I was able to, on one customer, the biggest client in New Zealand, which is a transmission power provider, I quoted on an open government tender of around $40,000 a month and closed on $40,000 a month because I spent the time doing all this in the beginning. And I was able to prove a substantial amount of value by not discounting, but showing, hey, the problem is actually way more than you think. You cannot stay in this state anymore, but you can solve it for 1/10 or 1/20th the price, if that makes sense. So I was able to differentiate us as a business and differentiate customer service, use customer service as a differentiator, use subject matter expertise as a differentiator to beat the competition and not give them a chance to take a deal off me, because I was trying to nullify that gravity that they had, where they have a bigger reputation. But to do that, I needed to control the message. Now, finally, we're getting towards the end now. Differentiation is fluid. It's not always the same in every situation. It can change depending if you're trying to use a geographical situation as a differentiator. It may not work in other cases. So if I was to, in the case before, using the geography as a differentiator as an Australian startup, if Autodesk was an Australian company based out of Sydney, I could not have used that as a differentiator. It wouldn't have worked. So differentiation works. It's fluid. It changes in certain situations. If I was competing against Atlassian, which is an Australian company, I could not use a geographical advantage as a differentiator. It just wouldn't work. So it's always changing, and you need to be aware of that. It also changes as your company evolves. What was an advantage yesterday might not be an advantage tomorrow as you grow. You may lose that ability to be nimble and make quick decisions because your company grows. Or maybe someone leaves in the business, or something happens that you can't, that your advantage changes and you need to change that. As market conditions change, could also change how you differentiate yourself as well. COVID a few years ago, that would completely change how you may differentiate yourself. I definitely could not have used a geographical uh, advantage because we were not able to travel here in Australia for a long time. Now, this is a case study of Fly Freely. Excuse me one second. Sorry, my dog lets itself in when it wants to. So Fly Freely was a drone management platform for enterprise clients and small to medium business. Now, they take a really complicated process when it comes to planning and flying missions inside enterprise organizations, right? Their challenge was their competitors were almost a quarter of their price. Because they couldn't differentiate themselves enough, they were forced to discount the price to match that to a certain degree. Now, they had a highly technical team that didn't appreciate the complexity of selling B2B, and they really struggled for a while. And because they couldn't articulate the true value, they were forced to compete on price because the market couldn't tell the difference between them and their 1/6 price competitor. And so they were naturally being drawn to the competitor that was well established in the market. So to discount that or nullify that to a certain degree, the only way that they compete was on price, right? Also, so deals weren't closing and they were stalling. They were stalling after the demo as well because they weren't articulating the value enough. Now, the outcomes was once we went through a process with them, they were able to differentiate their value effectively through a proven framework. They took control of their client's buying process. They become experts in each stage of what a client goes through, and they were able to move the purchase forward as well. Now, they tackled indecision. Indecision is the biggest competitor to anyone who's on this webinar. It's not your existing competitor in the market, it's just no decision. So they were able to take indecision off the table because they were able to recognize the business processes they were affecting and then create calculators to measure the current impact. And then they could show the ROI effectively. Now, an outcome of this, of differentiating properly, was they were able to double their revenue in 8 months. They will increase their total contract value by 55% and reduce the sales cycle by 60%. And it all starts with differentiation to create the competitive advantage. Now, DockerBook's another one. Mark here, they're a SaaS platform that connects the construction supply chain from orders to dockets and eliminate paperwork, basically. So they had a few key clients in the industry, but other deals seemed to be stalling. The founder was actually struggled to differentiate the value in the language the market needed to hear. There was a lack of insight into decision-making journey, and then deals were stalling. So what happened was when we started working together, they were able to clearly differentiate themselves and their domain expertise. So DockerBook was able to create a ROI calculator that showed them that within their businesses are spending on average of about $40 per docket to process it, and it was eating away at their profits in an industry where the margins were like 2 to 3%. And it reduced indecision as the deal blocker, and then they've made the process more efficient and able to speed deals up. And it all starts again with creating that competitive advantage and differentiation. This is probably one of the best success stories of this as well. So Antigen is a B2B SaaS platform that empowers patients with chronic conditions to improve outcomes at home with their AI-based platform, right? So the challenge is the Antigen team knew that they were providing massive value in a really old market, but it was complex, and but the complex stakeholder management blurred their value proposition. Because it blurred their value proposition, it made it really difficult to articulately differentiate themselves and prove the value that they were offering. So it was a disruptive model of care, and it contributed to long sales cycles and challenges improving the ROI. So Ali here was the founder. For ages, she tried to articulate her as-is model, fat guy model, and she couldn't do it. She goes, I can't do it. And I said, if you can't do it, your market can't do it, and you're going to really struggle to move forward in deals consistently and penetrate further into technology adoption lifecycle. But she stuck to it, to her credit. After about 4 or 5 weeks, she found it, at least a version of it that she was ready to take to market. And she was building a reproducible, differentiated framework to support the customer journey and bring confidence to the customer. They will clearly articulate the value and the way the client needs to move forward, and they took indecision off the table. So within a couple of weeks of figuring out that model, she's got a pilot on the table with a massive Australian health insurance company for 200,000 that will lead into a multi-million-dollar deal, proving out the as is and to be model, and then articulating that within their business. So it all started when she was able to differentiate herself in the most simple way that resonated, not only with the users of the business, but also the decision makers, so they could see the clear outcome that they will get. Now, how I can help, I'm just going to brush over this. So basically, I help founders and their startups develop the differentiated sales strategy. And it's leveraging the competitive advantages at each stage. So we'll work together and I help you create through a structured program that will align with your buyer's journey. So you become an expert in the stages that they go through. So you'll be able to create tools and strategies along the way that lead your potential clients to buying decisions quicker. So it gives you far more context of what's going on, and it reduces the risk of stalled deals and losing value along the way. So you also be able to build a playbook to teach others coming into your business. So if you're a founder and the goal is not necessarily is to help you secure sales today, but it's also to capture that tacit knowledge from yourselves and be able to impart that on the sales team and help them learn what you've learned, the hard lessons, so they can take it and move the ball forward and start winning more clients consistently. I know firsthand, working alongside the founder when I was at Redeye, he just had this subject matter expertise that did not transfer one iota to the sales team. I was just seen as a salesperson. So I had to figure out this strategy, and the strategy was understanding the buyer's journey. And then I could leverage the founder's subject matter expertise along that journey to maximize value as well. So it's a really key thing to think about, not just for today, but for next 3 or 4 years down the track. And it's achievable, very achievable to get a 10 to 20x return on investment within the next 24 months once that strategy gets embedded as well. Now, feel free to book in a time if you want to have a chat about that. I actually turn on. I've just put in a Calendly link in the session here before, under the offer. If you want to book in a time and talk about it, how it would apply to your business. I don't work with a lot of people at once. I make sure I work with a few select founders, and we'll go from there and have a chat. If it's at the very least, I can point you in the directions of some high level things that you can think about to start building out your strategy as well. Now I've got Michael, if you're still on the call, I've got let me find you. I think I can bring you on. Hopefully I can bring you on. Are you there, Michael? Right. I might not have the ability to right, stop presenting. All right, so I might not have the ability. Michael sent through, let me just go back to this stage as well. Technical difficulty here. So Michael, I've got your, you sent through some information with your new business at Draconian Labs. So you help in the development life cycle of a business. I don't have my email in front of me, sorry. But basically, you wrote down that these were some of your weaknesses when it comes to taking Draconian Labs, being ready to go to market now as a new product to market, technical founders who struggle to sell, lack of reputation, small team, and you have multiple platforms that aren't necessarily integrated as much. So what I thought I would say, like putting this down as weaknesses, the strengths here for me, for if I was in your position, we'll come to you in a second, Matt, is the taking new product to market is, learn from current products and innovated something like tackle from a fresh perspective. I also know that you're a subject matter expertise, an and you've developed from that point of view as well. Now, so because you're a technical founder and you struggle to sell, people don't like being sold to. So people don't like being sold to at all anymore. Don't like being sold to. So you provide genuine solutions or advice based on deep experience. So I would try to leverage that. Look, the truth is, people don't like being sold to. If you put a sales team in, if you struggle to sell and you go, okay, I'm just going to hire a sales team, they'll go out, push too hard. And because most of the meetings these days are done online, people will just disengage. They just won't. The opportunity is lost. So we can't sell anymore. It's about leading them and demonstrating domain expertise. And this is exactly the reason I believe technical founders are the key to sales success in 2023 and beyond. No reputation. So this will give you the chance to overservice, to work closely with a few key clients. And overservice. And I think that's when we have a chat earlier today. That's what you're planning to do with one of your potential clients. Now, because you have a small team, again, that's also a massive strength because you're responsive, right? Responsive and access to key decision makers, right? That's a strength. Now, multiple platforms is you could roll out specific functionality as needed and avoid what isn't, right? What isn't. So it could reduce cost potentially. Now, another area here, we didn't speak about your geographic location, Michael, but if I was you in your position, I would be drawing a ring around my city and just making a list of all the potential clients that I could approach that was within a 1 or 2 hour drive from the office or wherever you're located. Because if you are responsive and you want to work closely with a few clients, you have to think about when you win and you want to deliver on that. If you're flying to someone all the time, or you're spending a week away from you all the time and it's costing too much money to service that client, then you'll end up being at a loss. So you have to, with a bit of forethought, I would think about where my geography is and where I could travel to straight away and try to first go within that geographic location. As long as you can create a competitive advantage over if the biggest competitor in America is in the same town you are, you probably don't want to do that, right? You want to think about that and do what makes sense. I'll always draw like a dartboard where the bullseye is where I am. I'll aim for that. Then I'll draw concentric rings around and then I'll go from there. In Australia, it made more sense to go to New Zealand, which was 3 hours from where we are in Queensland, than to go to Western Australia, which was 6 or 7 hours to the west. So you have to think about that also. That if I was in your position here, it was a new product to market, I would say, yeah, it's an innovative. We know what the other competitors are doing, and we've taken a fresh approach because of our industry expertise, and try to start leveraging that as well. Find a little subset of the market that would respond to that, right? Other subject matter experts who are frustrated with the platforms that are on the market today. The last one here is Coach Matt. Coach Matt is looking to transition out of his role and transitioning out of his day job, right? So this also works in Matt's capacity, looking to target, individuals in 40s, from 40 or 50, when their, fitness is starting to get away. So the strengths of transitioning out of their job is, I think practical real world experience, right? Being there where his customers are now, not a standard, not a typical trainer, right? potentially, right? Still figuring out messaging, like that's okay. You don't want to be like everyone else, right? Don't want to be like everyone else. You want an individual. So an individual approach is probably not scalable over the long term, but that's not what you're looking for now. We don't want to scale, right? We just want an individual approach. And again, so this is the same, crafting the offer, build a bespoke program to meet the needs of someone. After building 3 or 4 of those, you get a good understanding. You probably have that already, right? Or maybe you're saying it's probably 80% the same program, but you're adding bits on. So you don't have to craft the offer. You can build it to whatever someone needs, and over time you might see patterns, and then you start getting that down into a more cookie cutter approach, right? Not well known. That's okay. So because of that, you need to take a one-on-one approach, right? And knowing that, so that you're from New York, you're right, one-on-one approach. I don't think you probably need to go anywhere further than New York. It's the most populated city in the world, I think. So because you're not well known and you're in New York, it gives you the ability to focus on the geographic advantage, right? Or whatever your day job is, trying to leverage the people in that industry and seeing if you can get into there and speak to those individuals, right? And that'll help you build you might be well known in your current day job, so you may be able to leverage that to get a foot into that industry. Then once you build up, maybe you can jump into another adjacent industry very close to that, and then start building that out as you go. If you're not in the banking industry and you're well removed in the health food industry, it might be a bit of a jump to get in the banking industry unless you've got a foothold, right? Unless you've got an introduction or referral into there. Limited marketing budget. I would imagine you have no marketing budget, or I put that in there. So that's okay. It just requires an individual reach out, right? Or be innovative there. Reach out, maybe having a coffee or something, maybe having a coffee or a one-on-one meeting initially, one-on-one meeting, right? One-on-one meeting. And that will allow you to craft your messaging. It will allow you to, having those one-on-one meetings will allow you to craft a lot of this out over time. But the marketing budget, if you try to scale that too quickly, then you'll lose the voice. You'll lose the ability to learn from your market as well. So if I was in both of your positions, that's what my starting point of turning those weaknesses into strengths. And I would see, okay, well, where can I go there? What makes sense? Where can I start trying to leverage and create a smaller niche market for myself? So that's all I had for the session today. We've got 5 minutes left. Does anyone have any questions? I'll open it up. If you want to put them into the chat, we can go from there. No worries, Dan. You're welcome. No worries, Matt. I'll just give it a couple of minutes and we'll wrap it up. No worries, Bill. Thanks for attending. All right. No worries, Damodar. Thank you for coming. Yep, I'll share the slides. I'll send these slides out afterwards. I'll put them into a PDF and I'll send them out to everyone in a follow-up email. All right. Thanks, everyone. All the best. Have a good week, and we'll speak to you soon.